Peter Laugharn is the president and CEO of the Hilton Foundation, a philanthropic organization committed to improving the lives of vulnerable and disadvantaged communities. With decades of experience in nonprofit leadership and international development, he has dedicated his career to social impact and humanitarian causes. Today, we are honored to have Peter with us to share insights on global philanthropy and sustainable development. I'm so glad you're at the table. Welcome to the Swift Hour.
Likewise. Thank you, Matthew.
So this is such an important week. The UN General Assembly, Climate Week, convening, and philanthropy is front and center. Give us a little bit of context of where we are from a philanthropic community and the potential impact that can be reached globally today. What role is philanthropy playing in this context?
Obviously, we're at a moment of promise and also a very difficult moment. And that will have been, evident in all the sessions, I think, at the summit here this week. What philanthropy tries to do is to help all of the actors work better. And we, the Hilton Foundation, we have our name, Hilton, on many buildings around the world. We don't need any more publicity than that. We're a funder of the wiring and the plumbing. In the humanitarian system, for example, we're trying to make sure that more money really gets to the people who are in need and who are really facing the conflicts. And often that means getting funding to local organizations. So we are pressing the UN system on its own commitments of getting 25% of its funding to local organizations in Mozambique, in India, in Mali, around the world. And we've shown that it can be done in our funding, and we're confident that it can be done in the humanitarian systems funding. This is a great week to be trying that because so many of the leaders of the humanitarian system are here. Similar in water and in early childhood and refugees.
No, of course, but I want to dig into that for a minute to talk about the role of philanthropy and the ecosystem between the public sector and the for-profit sector. Do you see, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that philanthropy really is here to kind of lay the groundwork that then produces those solutions that work for the public sector, work for the private? Because I've not heard that sort of perspective on philanthropy.
This is exactly what we should be doing. I mean, if you look at philanthropy as an actor, right, we're structured to exist financially in perpetuity. That's a long time. It's longer than the SDGs. It's longer than the sons and the grandsons of the SDGs, right? 100-year perspective is not too long for us to take. We are also independent actors who don't have a bureaucracy, who don't have to sell products, who don't need to get votes, and who don't need to fundraise, right? And that makes us both a champion of causes, it makes us early risk capital, and it makes us good neutral conveners in areas that may be either contentious on the one hand or sclerotic on the other, right? And, we really try to play that role in both our domestic and our international work.
What do you say to the people who say, but philanthropy is really just producing short-term solutions? It's not a permanent answer.
I think people who say that are normally thinking about, basically transactional charity, if you like, which
so there's a difference, transactional charity versus philanthropy.
Yes, and I don't want to short sell charity. It's very important. It's a human human impulse, and it really connects people in a compassionate way. But if you're talking about long-term solutions, if you're talking about system architecture, if you're talking about high leverage, you're talking a longer game of philanthropy. And, I would say that philanthropy and academia are the two actors in our society that have a cycle that is longer than 3 or 4 years, and you need that for the work that we're doing.
Talk a bit about the Hilton Foundation's focus globally. You are, frankly, all around the world. But first, talk about some of the issue sets that you're most prioritizing today. And then talk a little bit about how you have been able to use technology to increase the speed by which you're deploying a lot of these services.
Okay. Well, and let me first start by acknowledging our founder, Conrad Hilton, the founder of the hotel chain. If he were alive today, he would be a very happy participant in Concordia, and he would be leading task force groups or however you organize yourself to make change. He grew up in the territory of New Mexico before it was a state, had a heart scramble beginning, but really went on to own the Waldorf Astoria and the whole first international hotel chain in the world. And he left us with a lot of guiding values. Look up to people when you can and look down on no one. Assume your full share of responsibility for the world in which you live. Have your own policy, foreign and domestic. And be optimistic and enthusiastic, because nothing ever gets accomplished without them. So basically, those are the watchwords we live by. He also left us in his will the idea that we would, since all the funds that came in to fund the foundation were earned around the world, our spending should be done around the world as well.
I was going to ask you that decision between domestic projects and international projects, but really the inspiration for that is just simply that because of Hilton and how global it is.
Indeed, those are our marching orders, and we've always interpreted
from the
that
beginning.
From the beginning, although I think we gathered speed. We're 75 years old, just went through an adolescent growth spurt, and doubled the size of our endowment and our grant making through the bequest of his son Barron, who passed in 2019. But we've always interpreted over the last 30 years or so to be half domestic U.S. and half international. And I think the two speak to one another a lot. You asked what we do. In the States, our largest flagship program is on homelessness in Los Angeles, which is, I think, a domestic analog of the humanitarian crisis we see internationally, both in terms of resources not keeping up with the scale of crisis, but also needing new solutions than the ones that have been offered. And we can come back to that. I'm very proud of the work that we and others are doing in that area. Other areas in the States include opportunity youth, early childhood, foster youth, and Catholic sisters. That Conrad Hilton, being a devout Catholic, wrote that into his will that it should always be one of our programs. Internationally, the programs are refugees in Africa and Latin America, early childhood in Africa, East Africa in particular, and safe drinking water in 3 countries in Africa. If I look at the humanitarian system writ large in the world and homelessness in Los Angeles, these are both crises where the systems we've put together are good, and they're doing a lot of good, but they are not big enough to tackle the problems that we have, and they particularly are not tackling the increased inflow into both of those systems, whether it be homeless people in Los Angeles or refugees and other migrants in the international system. LA, where we are housing 28,000 people a year, the county, and that is the largest amount anywhere in the country. And yet we have more people than that who become homeless every year, and we have 500,000 people who are rent burdened and potentially homeless if they suffer a shock. So we're working with the city, the county, 87 other cities, philanthropy, civic leaders, labor, faith leaders, to put together the first metro plan on homelessness in Los Angeles so that we will all be rowing in the same direction. And I think this year we had the first decrease in homelessness in 6 years, and I think we're on a roll that people should keep watching LA for inspiration. We hope to do something similar with in the humanitarian system with the idea of locally led development.
I want to shift to nonprofit leadership.
Yeah.
Your career has been defined in leading nonprofit institutions. First, what is the thing that nonprofit leaders can learn from for-profit leaders, and what is the thing that for-profit leaders can learn from nonprofit leaders?
Well, I think there's extreme complementarity, and you'll find virtuosos in both sectors. I think what nonprofit leaders can learn is discipline, an eye for leverage, and ambition in the business world. How do you look at market share for good, if you like, and how do you not simply do something that is nice for the people in front of you, but that tackles the issue for the entire group of people? I think that starts to get into what the nonprofit sector can do for the for-profit sector. Because, if you take a Bill Gates phrase, right? This problem we're looking at, what would it take to solve that problem for the entire world or for the entire population that has it? And that is a form of thinking that pushes beyond the day-to-day, the routine, what our system can produce, right? And I think it is inspiring, not only for the for-profit sector, but also for the government leaders that are involved in the work that you do as well, who struggle day in, day out with very complicated issues and can get, their point of reference can be just getting through the day or just squeezing as much as they can out of their current resources. When the problem is actually getting bigger. They're planning with algebra instead of calculus, if you like, right? And I think a very strong mission-driven, we need to solve this for everyone who has it, along with a set of disciplined business skills, I think is really important.
So to that point, though, is the nonprofit sector, I've always feel that a lot of times the nonprofit sector is not competing with the private sector for talent in a way that they should be. And the thing I find so challenging in all of that is the issues a lot of nonprofits are focused on are some of the most complex, challenging issues. So how do you look at talent recruitment and retention today?
Yes, I mean, it's tough, right? Because, you take a Starbucks latte, right? You're going to pay $5 for it, and you get the coffee in it,
which I still can't get over. By the way. And I think it might be $7.
Yeah, right. But they convinced us to do it, right? And the coffee in it costs less than 50 cents plus the milk and the cup, and all of that is only $1. And then you're paying for real estate, you're paying for workers, and you're paying for profit. You're willing to pay for that, and that powers the engine of Starbucks, right? If you look at a nonprofit, people will say, $2 worth of work, we'll give them $1.95 and they'll have a nickel to run their business, right? And that is very constraining in terms of talent. That's constraining in terms of all the other needs of the business.
What led to that change? Why such skepticism?
Why are there two different standards?
Yes.
Well, I think there's a fair streak of puritanism in the way that Americans in particular, but all over the world, look at organizations that they call charitable. They want to make sure that almost all the money that goes to those organizations goes to serve the people that it should. And that's tremendously important, right? You should never lose sight of that. But what is the sweet spot between the donation that's made and the part of it that really powers an ambitious and successful driven operation, and the part that is for the goal, for the beneficiaries, right? Established nonprofits tend to be between 10 and 15% on that. And since they are big, they can do a lot more with 10% than a smaller organization could do with 15, right? But an organization that's just starting out will struggle with that and will struggle getting top-tier talent. So I think there's a lot of room for funders, whether they be individual or institutional, to think seriously about how talent should be resourced. Right? Because I would argue that driven talent in nonprofits is going to do more to solve the issues that you all care about here at this summit than the equivalent talent in the for-profit or governmental sector. And I don't mean to diss either of those, but if you look at the incentives in those systems, they are not perfectly aligned with a mission, right? Or on the governmental UN system, they're perfectly aligned with mission, but they have so much other stuff that's going on in terms of protocols, baggage, 70 years of institutional development, to say. And I think nonprofits have an important role in reminding people that things can be done in a leaner way, in a way that is more connected to people at the base, and in a way that is more sustainable over the long run.
Big picture, I can imagine, apart from Conrad Hilton, who has been the most influential person in your life to inspire this career path for you?
Oh my, there are so many. I would mention Sergeant Shriver, the founder of the Peace Corps and the Special Olympics. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Morocco in my early days. Well, I'm actually going to say Chris Liceta, the CEO of Hilton, I think has a beautiful spirit of social responsibility combined with real business acumen and one of the most thriving, corporate cultures on the planet. Just an array of people. Mother Teresa, you can't, how not? When you look at that, Pope Francis these days, spirit of humility, but really getting there in the trenches with people.
Well, Peter Laugharn, it's wonderful to be with you. Thank you so much for joining us for the Swift Hour.
Of course. Pleasure to know you, Matt.
Thank you.